I built a 0-person AI newsletter business that made over $2,000 just last month. There's no team, no payroll, and no freelancers involved. It's just a team of AI agents that handle everything for me. They write every edition of the newsletter. They've grown our subscriber list to over 6,000 subscribers. They even sell our ad inventory on autopilot. So all in, I spend less than 4 hours a week working on this business. In this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly how I built my local newsletter, Spokane Pulse, by using Paperclip.AI. I'll introduce you to the 4 AI agents that run the entire operation. I'm going to dive into the tools that power them and break down the playbook that I use so you can clone it and build a newsletter business just like this. Really quick, I want to briefly speak to the opportunity here of local newsletters and media companies as a whole. These businesses are quietly printing money right now. Naptown Scoop is a local newsletter based out of Annapolis and is doing over $320,000 a year in revenue. Wichita Life is another one based out of a small market in Kansas that's still doing over 6 figures. This model is wide open for most cities across the world. So stick around to the end because I'm going to be giving away the full Paperclip.AI company export, which is the exact setup that I use to run Spokane Pulse. So you can import it, swap in your city, and start building your very own 0-person AI newsletter business. Let's get into it. All right, jumping right into it, I first want to show you guys what Spokane Pulse is so you guys know I'm not full of it and actually show you the numbers going on behind the scenes. First thing here is going to be the newsletter dashboard here inside a tool called Beehiiv, which manages all the newsletters, all of our subscribers, and hosts our website. So we can see we have 6,662 subscribers right now, a 47.5% open rate, which actually is going to go up here over time because we just sent out a brand new newsletter. And each of our newsletter editions have over an 11% or near 11% click-through rate, which are all pretty incredible stats when benchmarked against all the other newsletters out there. Industry standard is somewhere between 20 and 30%. And so we're almost double that. So it is possible to create a really well-received AI written newsletter without coming across as spammy or poor quality. Now let me show you the website. And so very simple setup where we have really just a feed here of all of our latest posts. And if I click into one here, we can see that we have our latest edition here written completely by AI and an agent on our team. We have our Instagram account here with several thousand subscribers, giving breakdowns here for weekend posts that each get pretty good engagement and is only growing by the day. And finally, here is actually the result of an ad deal I closed nearly 2 weeks ago with a local insurance broker to get featured in Spokane Pulse. And so this is this operator here, McKinley Romero, who's an insurance broker. And then we have this featured ad in this edition of the newsletter. So this is a real business actually running here for me. It's not a made-up proof of concept or a toy business. My wife and I are running this every single week and bringing in real revenue. So that's the setup here and what I want to share with you guys, how to build this for your local city and turn this into a real business. Let's switch gears here and now jump into Paperclip.AI, which is going to be the tool that is going to be orchestrating this whole thing. So here's the dashboard. There's a lot going on. Don't worry about that just yet. I first want to show you here the org chart of our company that breaks down every single agent we have hired. So on our team, we have a CEO agent who sits at the top. And underneath that, if I zoom in here, we have a content director, a sales director, and a growth engineer. So a pretty simple setup when it comes to agent orchestration. But let me explain the roles and responsibilities. The content director here is going to be the lead and the owner of everything related to content. So every week, he's the one writing the Thursday edition of the Spokane Pulse newsletter, and he's pitching and he's curating all the different events that are going to go on our Instagram posts that we use to round up weekend events in the city. The sales director is going to have full ownership over the sales process. On Spokane Pulse, if we go back to the website, we have this Advertise with Us button right here in the header. And then if I pull up in addition here, we also do this call out on the newsletter, really targeted towards some business owner in the city of Spokane. To see this, click it, and then go through the process of trying to get a quote on our advertising packages. So this is kind of the form we take them through where we capture their contact info. And once that gets submitted, that is going to get handed off to our sales director to go into email and negotiate back and forth and present our advertising packages to the lead who just came in. So really anything related to sales is done by the sales director. The other cool thing I want to touch on really quick under the umbrella of the sales director is the process of creating the ads themselves. So this ad created right here was actually all AI generated. So when we get to the spot in the sales process where we do want to pitch and present them a couple of different ad options, the sales director goes out, scrapes whoever's website we're talking to, really puts themselves in the shoe of their target customer, and puts together a package of several different ad options. So once we have the writing together, the sales director then calls into Nano Banana and is generating this image for us. So we have the headline, the image, the body paragraph right here, as well as a call to action button that's going to go out to their website. So that is a huge chunk of work off my plate every single week when it comes to doing ad sales, which is one of the most kind of tedious manual back and forth parts. The sales director is the guy who runs it all. And then finally, the growth engineer is our builder on the team. He's the technical employee who is responsible for and has full ownership over building any integration, any data scraping pipelines, trying to figure out how we're going to go out and get local news stories, local events, and get that set up in a good way that the content director can easily read from. So he's the hacker, he's the builder, he's the one doing all the technical work here on the team. And finally, going back to the CEO, once again, this is the person who I'm interacting with on a more day-to-day basis. So if I have a goal I need to communicate across the organization, I work with the CEO, and then he is going to fan that out and make sure that everyone on the team is up to speed. So that is the basic high-level setup of my team. But before we go too much deeper here into the dashboard, I want to give you a little bit of a higher-level view of what Paperclip actually is. So according to their website, it's the human control plane for AI labor, which is a little bit abstract, but the way that I still like to present it is more of an orchestration layer for AI agents. Everything that I showed you here in the org chart could be broken down into custom prompts, custom skills for something like OpenClaw, where it all live together. But the main benefit of using a tool like Paperclip and this orchestration layer is you're able to get hyper specific on defining the roles, responsibilities of each different agent on your team. One problem that I hit when I was going through the process of trying to automate my newsletter, first starting with OpenClaw, was just kind of skill bloat and context bloat. I was trying to have all these jobs that ran behind the scenes and also jobs that were running at the same time to manage the sales process. And context would sometimes not work, and I didn't have a ton of visibility into when something was successful or when it failed. And in my opinion, an agent orchestrator like Paperclip solves this for me. And so instead of having a million cron jobs set up that's all handled by the same agent, maybe that are going to be competing with each other at a certain time of the day, you can delegate each agent to have ownership over their own routine. And so let me go through a few examples of this, starting with the content director. So every single Wednesday afternoon, he's going to go out and curate stories and write the Thursday edition of the Spokane Pulse newsletter in this routine I have defined here. If I click this open, it's a very simple prompt that I have underneath the routine. And it basically is a cron job that's getting scheduled and executed every Wednesday at this 4 p.m. time I've set up here. The important thing I am noting on this routine is going to be the reference of the skill. When I built my content director, I packaged together a set of skills that he has access to with specific knowledge on how to best curate the newsletter, put it together, and match my voice, my tone, my writing style, and what type of events that I would pick out if I was writing this local newsletter myself. So we can see here, we have the Spokane Pulse Thursday skill, and if we view it, right here, we're going to see all the content here. And so it breaks down a pretty detailed approach of all the rules, the editorial process that this content director should follow. And so the content director, when going back to the org chart, he's the only one who has knowledge of this skill. The sales director doesn't need to know about how to write the newsletter. That would just cause more context bloat and more confusion. So the main benefit of an orchestrator like Paperclip is really delegating specific work to specific agents and having their skill set honed in to do that specific job, much like a real company. Outside of that, there's a couple of other really nice quality of life improvements that come with this. Going back to routines, these routines can be scheduled in parallel, so your growth engineer and your content director can be working on something at the same time. If you jump into this, we can go ahead and see that on our past runs, we can see a status report of if something succeeded, failed, or if something needs to get looked into. And so if there was an error going on, maybe I can look back. I think this was during downtime from Anthropic. We can go ahead and investigate this. Oh, this looks like the Gmail connection was down. And so it gave me a report on what needs to get fixed. And where if I was using something like OpenClaw to handle this, it would take a bit more digging to trace through what went wrong, get it fixed, and make sure it's reliable going forward. So that's my main sales pitch to you on using a tool like Paperclip to go ahead and orchestrate your company's operations operations or a specific business unit's operations for you. All right, so that's the setup I have right now, but how do we actually get work done with the company? And that's going to be going here into this new issue button here, where we're going forward with assigning work to one of our agents. Like I mentioned before, most of the time I'm just chatting with the CEO to get something done. So let's do a new one here to help create a plan for where we should invest time into next for growth. So I'm going to use a dictation tool here to just write this out. So for the issue title, we're going to go something like fetch latest metrics on the status of our newsletter and help brainstorm growth opportunities. And then under the description here, I'm going to say, I want you to fetch the latest metrics from Beehiiv on our growth rate, open rate, and click-through rate, and prepare a list for me of the top 3 priorities that you think would be the best use of our time to invest in order to grow the newsletter faster. So we got that set up here. It is assigned to the CEO, and we're going to go ahead and click on Create Issue. On our dashboard here, we're going to see this spawns off some work for them to do. And if we open it up, we can see this detailed log of everything running behind the scenes. I don't use this runs view too much. And so if we go to the issues tracker here underneath work, we're going to be able to see the status of this item, kind of like what you would see in a project management tool. So we have a status like to do, in progress, for review, and then we can kind of see a trace in all the commands that the agent is thinking through as it's running. So I'm going to pause it right here while it's working, and then I'll share with you when it's done. All right, the CEO just finished up his work, and we can see the breakdown of what he came back to me with. So the first thing he did was he went out to the Beehiiv API and fetched a trend breakdown of all the recent growth happening over the last 10 weeks of newsletter sends. He gave me an assessment here that the newsletter is in a strong shape, growth is accelerating, and it's above industry benchmarks, which is honestly a great health check and status check on the business. Once that was done, he then came back to me with his proposal on the top 3 growth priorities. Number 1, doubling down on referral-driven acquisition. So I agree with this. We should introduce a referral program. Number 2, cross-promote through local Facebook groups and community partners. So we're doing Reddit posts already, but finding Facebook groups and introducing that is a great idea. And number 3 here, introducing a second weekly touch point, like a midweek edition, so we can send more newsletters a week and grow our business further. So honestly, I agree with all these. If I were the CEO right now, each of these moves would be something that we're considering. So let's go forward here and actually take this a step further and have the CEO put together an action plan and start delegating work across the rest of the team. I like number 2 here. I think this is the lowest hanging fruit because we can leverage all the content we're already scraping for our local newsletter and just repurpose this into a good format for Facebook groups and other community partners. So let's actually then leave a comment here and say, I really like going forward with your idea on number 2. Please work with a team to create a plan and kick off any work needed for the content director if we need to spin out a new skill to create and curate content best for local Facebook groups. I think it would also be helpful if you could go out and find some Facebook groups for us in the Spokane area that would be ideal promotion candidates. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and comment this. The work is going to go back to do here until the CEO picks us up, and he is actually able to read my message, figure out that my intent is to work with the rest of the team and assign work like creating a skill and assign work like having the content director create a skill and research which Facebook groups we should be posting to. So that is the power of agent orchestration. Next up, we are going to go through the process of getting Paperclip set up on your computer, hiring your team, and then building out some skills that will be able to do this for a local newsletter business just like yours. So next up, we are going to be going through the process of setting up Paperclip to run on our computer, hiring our team of AI agents to mimic the structure of my organization here, and then building out some skills that will allow us to create a brand new local newsletter. Let's get into it. Hey, super quick here before we continue, I just want to flag that there are going to be parts of this full setup here that I had to cut out for the sake of YouTube. There's so much that goes into going from 0 to 1 and having a business run on autopilot that it couldn't be fit into a single YouTube video. Things like how to actually grow your first 1,000 subscribers, how to set up the full sales pipeline and make your first sale, and then how to grow it beyond that using tactics like Reddit marketing, Instagram marketing, and a couple tips and tricks that I've learned actually running Spokane Pulse for the past several months. And so if this sounds interesting for you, I've put together a full nearly 10-hour course that breaks down all of the little details and the nuance that goes into setting up a business just like this. To get access, click on that first link in the description of the YouTube video to join my school community. Then underneath the classroom tab, you're going to see this course here called the 0-Person Newsletter Business. That's where everything's going to be hosted. And over the next few months here, as I improve my system, I'm going to be adding new modules, new growth hacks, and new tips and tricks on how you can scale your newsletter business even further. So please check this out if you want to learn how to run the business and sales and marketing side of a media company like this. All right, let's get back to the build. In the next step, we are going to have to get a little bit technical and fire up our terminal in order to get Paperclip running on our computer. Don't worry, it's a couple easy steps, and I'm going to take you through it. The first thing you need, if you don't have this set up already, is going to be installing Node.js, which is this JavaScript runtime that's able to execute code on your computer. So if you don't have this, go to nodejs.org, click on Get Node.js, and download the package you need for your operating system. Pretty easy to set up, just a few seconds to install. So do that really quick, pause here, and come back if you don't have that already. The next thing to do here is actually setting up the onboarding process for Paperclip. So go to the website, Paperclip.ing. Then if we scroll down and click on Getting Started, we're going to see the command we have to run here in our terminal to get everything spun up. So go ahead and copy this, go to your terminal, we'll paste it in, and we should see everything running here. So need to install the following packages. We'll hit yes. That is going to start spinning here behind the scenes, getting everything set up. And if all goes well, we should see some success messages print out and then get a URL we're able to navigate to on our browser. All right, here we go. We can see a bunch of green check marks, which looks good. And if we scroll down, we should do one more yes command to apply pending migrations. And since I've installed this before, we're going to see the company I've already created. So when you open up your instance of Paperclip, it's going to be on a URL like 127.0.0.1:3100. That just means it's this website running on your computer. And so that all is as expected. So don't worry about that. On your screen, when you set up for the first time, you're likely going to see a view just like this to get your first company set up inside of Paperclip. The top level grouping that kind of orchestrates everything together is this company entity. So we need to spin this up first. In our case, we're going to go forward with creating a new local newsletter targeting the city of Bend, Oregon. I'm going to call it the Bend Beat. And I want to grow the Bend Beat to its first 1,000 newsletter subscribers in Beehiiv. There we go. We'll just fix the typing here where Beehiiv is going to be our newsletter provider. We'll click next. And the first thing we got to do here is actually hire our very first agent. And so I like to start with hiring the CEO. He's going to be the head honcho responsible for being the boss of all the other agents. He has more permissions and he's able to orchestrate everything going on underneath him. First decision we have to make here is what is the adapter type? In, Paperclip terminology, this is basically just what agent or agent harness is going to be powering this employee. This is a really cool thing about Paperclip is you don't have to get locked into just one type of AI model to power it. You can choose from anything here. But honestly, I would use the default here for Claude Code just to run the whole thing. I've had the most success with that on my testing, and I would honestly keep it simple, do the same. So if you don't have Claude Code already installed, pause here, go to the official Anthropic docs, follow those install steps and come back here. I do recommend doing a quick check and just click on test now to check the adapter. If everything's working where our Paperclip instance is able to talk to Claude Code in the background as the brain to power our agents, we're going to see this past going on right here. If you get an error message, just paste that into Claude or ChatGPT, follow the steps they suggest, or check on the Paperclip GitHub, and there should be something there that will help you guide it through. So you may have to use your debugging skills a little bit if you do get an error, but I do feel confident by using an AI agent or ChatGPT, you're going to be able to figure this out. All right, we're going to go next. And so the first thing we have to do here is actually make our hire. So they kind of pre-fill this option for me. I want to clear this out. We'll clear out the title. And let's go back here to our org chart on Spokane Pulse, that company, to see who we want to hire first. I do think the growth engineer makes the most sense because he's going to be building the internal tooling that a lot of the other agents depend on, like the data scraping pipeline to pull out and scrape local news stories and local events happening in the city of Bend. And so I think we kind of have to build our foundation here first with the growth engineer. Coming back to our dashboard, let's do hire a growth engineer for the task title we're going to assign to the CEO. And we'll keep this first line that Paperclip pre-filled for us. Going into the description, this is where we're just going to do a high-level brain dump of what we want this new hire to be responsible for. So I'm just going to dictate here. And we'll say, I want you to come up with and create a hiring plan for a growth engineer who's going to be the very first employee at our company. This is going to be the agent responsible for being like the builder who builds all the connective tissue related to integrations, data scraping, data pipelines, and has a really strong experience and capabilities in all of those areas. For example, he's going to build a scraping pipeline for our local newsletter to pull out stories in local newsletters. And we need this person to be really good at scraping and extracting arbitrary data in whatever format we're able to find on the web. Outside of that, there's going to likely be internal tools we need to build, reporting capabilities, things of that. So this person needs to be very experienced in data operations. So we'll leave it at that for now, and we'll click next. And let's go ahead and launch this. Just confirming here, we have the Bend Beat, which is going to be our new newsletter for Bend, Oregon. The CEO, which is powered by the Claude Code brain. And we're going to hire our first employee, who is our growth engineer. We'll create this, and on our dashboard, we're going to see this getting kicked off, where our CEO is getting to work. We can also go to our inbox, where we see that the hire growth engineer is running underneath the Issues tab. The inbox and issues tab. And this is where I like to work out of the most inside of Paperclip. And so we can see what commands are being run in an easy to read view. And then any comments they leave after completing their task, they'll appear here for us to give more feedback on, tell it to correct something, or just say it's good to go and continue with the rest of the work we want to do. So this is spinning right here. Let's go back to our inbox, and I'll come back here once this CEO agent finishes up making the hire. All right, the CEO agent finished up. Let's jump into the issue again, and we can see that he went through the process of creating the hiring plan, detailing and expanding on his core responsibilities, and then actually went forward in the Paperclip system to create this approval item for us. So hire the growth engineer. Let's take a look at their capabilities. First engineer owns the connective tissue for web scraping, data extraction, ETL pipelines, third-party integrations, internal tooling, and reporting dashboards. Deep data operations experience, ships quickly, instruments what they build, and pulls arbitrary web data into structured form. So this is perfect. This is the exact kind of builder I want on my team here for this newsletter company. So let's approve it. So that is done. And if we now come to our org chart, we're going to see here that the growth engineer is added to the team, living underneath our CEO. So great. That makes a ton of sense. And I think it's time to go forward here, actually having our growth engineer build something for us. So when I'm thinking through how to create content for a local newsletter, so let me pull up Spokane Pulse so you have a good example again. Here's the edition we send every Thursday, where we give a cute little intro, optional ad, and then the big meat of this edition of the newsletter is the event breakdown. So Friday, we're doing all the music events going on, and there's some interesting workshops going on around town. Saturday, a lot more events actually split up across a pretty diverse audience. So maybe some family-friendly stuff we weave in, some community stuff like this Earth Day cleanup, and this big race events going on. And we do that for Sunday as well. So it's a pretty simple format that we cover for each edition of the newsletter, in addition to hitting on some local stories from, local media outlets happening in the area, all packaged together in a nice curated way that is valuable to community members in the city of Spokane. So that's the overview and kind of the end goal we want to build towards here. And so working back from there, we need to figure out how do we scrape and pull in a lot of these event candidates and local story candidates that we may want to feature in an edition of the Bend Beat newsletter. I think we want to start wide, pull in all this event data that we can, and then we'll have our content director later on sort through that data, curate it, and pick out what's going to be the best for our audience. So let's build up the scraping pipeline first and the database that this is all going to live inside. So the first thing we're going to do here is actually have the CEO do some work themselves to really pick out what sources he think is going to best represent our newsletter and the general vibe we're going for. So this is a resource I've actually created here for the course, getting into how to build these agents. And so I'm just going to copy this right now. At a high level, this is just a quick prompt here. We're going to drop into Paperclip to have the CEO execute to try and scour the internet for local news websites, city subreddits, district event pages, niche blogs, and event venues that could be useful content and useful context for us to evaluate and include in our newsletter. So I got this copied. This is for Kansas City, Missouri, so we'll have to update that city. But if we go back to Paperclip, go to our CEO, assign a new task, and let's say do initial source research. This is going to be under the onboarding project because we're trying to get our initial setup done. I'm going to paste this in, and we will switch this out with Bend, Oregon. And just making sure we'll update this other location too. And we'll kick this off. So the CEO is going to get to work here trying to find some great sources for us, and he's going to come back with a report when he's done. So I'll pause here and share that when that's complete. All right, our agent just got back to us, and we can see we have this pretty comprehensive report that came back from Bend, Oregon, sourcing local news and events. So let's go through this. So we can see plenty of websites here for local news, several different city subreddits, district event pages, popular event venues, and that looks like it covers it. So pretty great start here. This is something we can always expand, either searching manually or like flagging to the CEO to go figure out how to handle a source like this. But this is a great starting point. And so let's look here at the bottom for their recommendations to go forward. So if we look down in the comment they left, they do share the highest signal anchors for the pipeline. So I think this is what I want to start with when having our growth engineer go out and actually implement this data scraping pipeline for us. So let's just check some of these. Let's do Source Weekly, Bend, see what's there. Bend's Daily Digital. If we look at their calendar, it does look like there are some events here, which is great for us to pull in and actually curate and feature when it's time for the content director agent to go ahead and write the newsletter. That looks good. And honestly, I think we should just jump in and have the growth engineer start building and see if they can consume these different sources. So let's go forward, actually expanding here in a comment, now assigned to the growth engineer to get to work. So what I'm going to do next here is actually come back to this other resource I've made that is included in the course that breaks down a very detailed spec that I've extracted after months of iterating on Spokane Pulse that really breaks down the best data ingestion system I was able to come up with my growth engineer working there. So we can see, looking at the table of contents here, we have a system overview breaking down the high-level architecture, the core pipeline, the adapter pattern we're going to use, which is really important for scraping accurate data from kind of these open-ended websites, all with their different data formats, breaking down the source adapter config, kind of how we manage the huge repository of all of these sources we want to pull data from, and getting more into the nitty-gritty of how we're going to deal with the data getting stored, saved, and used for later consumption by other agents. So pretty detailed breakdown here. Of course, this is something you could just say, hey, growth engineer, I want you to go out and build a data scraping pipeline for XYZ sources, but I do recommend making use of this resource here because it is the system that has been the most reliable for me. Last thing you want to do is be patching errors, and the last thing you want to be doing here is patching errors and fighting your agents. And so I would recommend just dropping this in. So I'm going to go ahead and do a huge copy paste here. We're going to drop it in as a new comment. And instead of using these Kansas City items, because that was a previous newsletter I was working on, underneath initial sources, we're going to clear this out. And I'm just going to grab the high value signal anchors from the pipeline that the agent flagged to me. So let's just paste those in and tell it to get to work. Before I do this, actually, I am going to leave a brief note up top to make it more clear this is for Bend, Oregon, and not Kansas City. So one point of clarification, this is going to be building the scraping pipeline for Bend, Oregon, not Kansas City, Missouri. There we go. And we'll send that off. So I'll let this go, and I will report back on what the agent comes back with, and then we can test it to see what kind of data we're able to pull back in. All right, the first set of changes just came back from our growth engineer building out the implementation for this pipeline, and I want to go over the results with you. The first thing that was shipped here in the heartbeat with a couple of key components finished are the source adapters being built out for all of these places we flagged. So the Reddit Bend new subreddit filter, the Source Weekly News, Source Weekly Events Calendar, the Visit Bend website, and the Central Oregon Daily website. So we were able to go through, build out the adapters that actually scrape local news stories and local events from each of these spots, which is a great start. The next part, which is really cool here, which means we hired a good growth engineer. Sometimes in the past, the agents can get a little bit lazy, but we are seeing kind of an in-process check of the data that came back. So Visit Bend, it found 50 different items of data for us to go ahead and capture, source weekly news, 10 plus entries off the news feed, and it even flagged an issue it hit with processing data from Central Oregon Daily. So scrolling down here, it actually decided to pick up continuing work and is making an attempt to fix the data it's pulling out from Central Oregon Daily. So if you're going through this process and you don't see like an inline check like this, I would ask your agent to ask for evidence and a self-audit of the quality of data that was reported back. This is something that's really important when working with agents because by default, they may be a little bit on the lazier side, and that's kind of behavior we have to correct and make sure they build memories and update their soul to tackle. So provide that feedback as you're going through this process when setting this up. So I'm going to let this run once again here to get this fixed up, and I'll share the final results. All right, now the growth engineer is fully finished up with the implementation here of this fix it made to Central Oregon Daily. So now we're seeing that 39 records were actually extracted from that data to begin to start actually going forward with bringing on our content director to start creating a real edition of our newsletter. So looking through here, we can see the detailed breakdown of everything it did, which is great because we want to be able to audit this and make sure that nothing was glanced over from the sources we wanted to wire up. So just speaking a little bit more technical here, we can see that inside our system, we are writing out this .jsonl file, which is going to serve as our database for any local events, stories, news items that we want to bring together as possible event candidates in the newsletter. The other thing that's really cool here that I want to mention is this engineer actually went forward with wiring up its own daily routine. This was going to be the next thing I was going to tell you guys about how to actually set up, but this engineer did it itself and took the initiative to do so, kind of inferring from my own goal in its instructions, which is awesome. So bend content pipeline, daily run, and we're going to see that we want the growth engineer every single day at 6 a.m. to go forward with running the bend scraping data pipeline. So it's calling this script against all registered adapters. This produces the JSON database, just like what we talked about, plus the report of the status of any scraping that was going on. And so it can review that and report back a summary on the issue it creates. So if we want to, we can actually run this right now. It'll appear here underneath the runs, and any issues that it comes up with as it's executing, it'll report back here in the routine. Just like I was talking about before, if you go to routines, jump into one, and then click runs, you'll see the full history here of all runs, which is perfect. So this is going to pretty much wrap it up here for the initial hiring and growth step. So this is going to pretty much wrap it up here for the initial hiring and setup we want to do here for our growth engineer. His first daily task, we went through the process of bringing him on board, getting him up to speed on the capabilities we need him to be good at. We shared him a design document of what we want him to go out and scrape, and he built a system that he will run daily and have full ownership of for capturing data relevant to our newsletter, the Bend Beat. So I'm going to stop it right here, and in this next section, we're going to go ahead and hire our content director and see if we can actually put together a real draft edition of a newsletter. So now jump right into it and go through the process of hiring our next AI agent, who is going to be our content director. Like I mentioned before, this is the employee who has full ownership of anything and everything related to curating and creating content for the business. In the scope of Spokane Pulse, this is running our Instagram account. So basically curating the events that go on Instagram posts. And the main one is actually putting together all of the newsletter content that we see here. So we want to get him hired. We want to have him read the database we just had our growth engineer put together for local news stories and events, and we want him to curate out a good set of events, kind of following a similar format that I've done here in Spokane Pulse. So let's make this hire. So I'm going to go to the company org chart, click in the CEO, assign a new task, and then we're going to say hire a content director. Then in the description, we're going to say, you are the CEO and the person responsible for setting the vision of the company. I need you to make a hiring plan here and go forward with the hiring process for a content director agent. This is going to be the person who is responsible for reading data that exists in the content database set up by the growth engineer, curating the best and most interesting and a diverse set of events that will go into eventually an Instagram post for our company, as well as curating the core events and formatting that in our brand voice to end up in our weekly newsletter. And then we're going to expand a bit more. This hire needs to have strong capabilities and experience with running local newsletters, is an expert in writing local newsletter copy, and has experience managing social media accounts. All right, so we'll add this to the onboarding project, click create issue, and the CEO is going to get to work.
All right, back here in the inbox, we can see the CEO just finished up his hiring plan. Let's look at what he came back with. So the content director is going to be owning the editorial for the Bend Beat, reads the merch content feed produced by the growth engineer scraping pipeline. So it's actually pointing to the database it needs to work with, which is great. Curates the most interesting and diverse Bend area events, writes on-brand Instagram posts, and assembles the weekly Beehiiv newsletter. Expert in local newsletter copywriting, event curation, and social media account management. Collaborates with the growth engineer on pipeline feedback and data gaps. This looks great. I do like the part noted here at the end for how it can work with the growth engineer to kind of auto-resolve and patch things when there's data gaps or if something's missing. That's more work happening behind the scenes that I don't even have to think about or micromanage. So let's approve this hire. And let's check out the org chart. So now we got our content director here now on the team. So going back to my Spokane Pulse company really quick here and pulling up the org chart, going to the content director and then pulling up his skills. This is kind of the next direction I want to showcase here and go through the process of building out a skill together. As you can see, I have a lot enabled here, like Instagram weekend events, Reddit Spokane events, which is going to be responsible for creating a weekly subreddit post. We have the Spokane Pulse Monday edition and the Spokane Pulse Thursday edition that gives a detailed breakdown of how to put together this edition of the newsletter. So that's kind of what I want to jump into next is go through the process of creating a skill that the agent is going to have ownership over, which is going to kind of standardize process on how it can write this edition of the newsletter. So let's jump back now to our new company here in Paperclip and get this started. For this task, I'm going to jump into the CEO and actually create a new task under him first because CEOs do have the permission to actually create and write skills. And so we need the CEO and the content director working together. So let's go ahead and call this work with the content director to create a new skill for curating events and putting together a draft for the Thursday edition of our newsletter in the Bend Beat. And so we'll fix this from the transcription tool. And then we'll say, I want you to work with at content director to create a brand new skill that the content director is going to have ownership over for drafting the Thursday edition of our newsletter. This edition of the newsletter is going to be an events-focused newsletter that highlights some of the most interesting upcoming weekend events. I want you to go ahead and scan and scrape through the Spokane Pulse website and look at some of their past Thursday newsletter editions to get a feel for the kind of curation we're going for and how to format this newsletter. Here's a link to it. So we'll grab a link to Spokane Pulse so it can crawl through. And if I come back here and paste that in, there should be enough context for our CEO and the content director to now get to work. So what I would expect here is after I kick this off, they're going to collaborate together, go forward with scraping through the Spokane Pulse website, reading through the content that I've put together, and coming back with a proposal and actually implementing a new skill here that's going to get created for writing the Thursday edition of the newsletter, just like what we've done here inside Spokane Pulse. It's just that easy. You can have your CEO tagged on any issue with the other employee who you want to own it and then say, create a skill for something. And they're going to go out and just do it for you to review and then iterate and refine further over time. So let's go ahead and follow along what's going on in the dashboard. We can see underneath the inbox, we have this new issue created here, and we can follow along how the CEO and the content director are doing. I'll come back here once we get to a good checkpoint and share what has happened. Okay, work just finished up here between the CEO and the content director. Let's check through and see if everything was created as we expected. So here's the issue that was marked as done. They said they built a new skill and actually drafted the first Thursday edition of this newsletter. So let's scroll down, see if we can find this. And looking here, it does look like we have our draft of the newsletter, which is great. So here we go, where we have the intro, a big thing going on all weekend long, which does match kind of like a variation of all weekend long on the Spokane Pulse newsletter, but with it, the agent's own spin on it going into the weekend. Midweek moves looks like another event section where it broke down other events, which is cool. And some other important notes here. So pretty interesting. Not one-to-one with the Spokane Pulse newsletter, but depending on your messaging, your tone, your voice, this is something that is very easy to guide the agent to fix by providing examples and telling your content director, hey, change this section to maybe match the Spokane Pulse formatting a little bit more, or we could just run with this. There's some cool ideas here. I do like heard around town, the midweek moves. I think that's pretty interesting by just letting the agent cook here in the task we gave. Let's check how this was set up and see if we can spot test. Let's spot test the accuracy of some of these events. So let's check this salmon run here for this half marathon, Saturday at 9 a.m. Bend, Oregon. And it does look like we have on April 18th. So 2 days from now. So today's Thursday. So that is correct. And is there a 9 a.m.? So there we go. Half marathon starting at 9 a.m. Pretty cool to see some real data being scraped from our growth engineer, and then our content director consuming that and actually bundling this together into a draft edition of the newsletter. Cool thing about this too is you can actually download this as a document since we crafted this as a document. And so if you pull this up into something like Cursor, or if you just want to copy it from here, you're going to be able to plug that into Beehiiv's text editor really easily, since Markdown is this kind of transportable text format. So once you have this created, you can just copy paste in your newsletter editor and be ready to send in just a few minutes. All right, the other thing I do want to verify here is what happened with the skill we asked for. That's what I was worried about, and I want to see if we got this actually set up. So scrolling down here, if we look at our skills, we can see we have this Thursday bend beat skill actually created, and it's going to break down when to use it, how to use it. Also check underneath the content director to see if he has a skill applied. And it does look like it is. So we have all of the built-in paperclip skills, which we never touch, and this custom skill that was imported. So pretty incredible. So we now have the content director with a skill ready in hand with everything it needs to analyze all the news stories, all the local events, bundled together to feature in the upcoming weekend events. Let's go under routines and see if that was added in. It does not look like the content director added a routine here, but that's okay. I'll show you the process on how to set this up yourself. So we'll create this routine and we'll call this Write Thursday edition of the Bend Beat newsletter. Okay, we'll fix this. And we're going to go ahead and assign this to our content director. We'll do no projects for now. And then we'll say, use your Thursday skill to write this weekend's upcoming edition of the Bend Beat. Make sure that you share the final output as a document here on this issue so we can review it and provide feedback. So that looks good. We'll click Create Routine. And now that we have this configured, it's going to appear here under the Routines tab, but we do need to set up and apply a schedule to it. So let's open this up. We'll go down to Schedule, and we want to go every week. So weekly, let's go Wednesday, and let's go in the afternoon time, like around 3 p.m. to actually add this schedule trigger. So that has been added successfully. And as soon as this time comes on Wednesday to write this newsletter, we'll be able to see it appear here underneath the runs. But we can also run now to kick it off once again, and we'll see that data appear just like what we did before. So there you go. We have our team of agents working together to produce a meaningful piece of content, all set up here in underneath an hour. Pretty awesome to see this all coming together. The other thing I want to touch on is when things go wrong, and it's actually easier than you may think on how to fix this. So say when you're going through the setup process, your growth engineer hit a bug, or your content director, couldn't actually analyze the database like you're expecting. When you hit cases like this, it's very simple to fix. My process that I follow is I jump into whatever ticket or issue that was created that is still having the issues. So we have that context bundled together on what we were asking for, and then it includes the agent's actions on what went wrong. When I'm trying to fix it, I just give a detailed report of what I'm observing, what I would expect, and usually provide some examples. Then at the end of that, this is very important, I ask the agent as part of its fix to apply its learnings either into a core memory or to create a new skill if this is going to be a really common use case. And so as we work more and more with our agents, we're going to get more aligned as time goes on and get better and better output. So in the beginning, there's going to be some investment here because your agent can't read your mind. And as time goes on, as you provide more feedback, give more concrete examples, get these kind of workflows for the business bundled into skills and saved as core memories, then you're going to be working much more smoothly and much more efficiently in this business. So keep that in mind. It does take that initial investment. All right, that covers it here for our content director agent in our company. All right. This video here on YouTube is already getting way more dense than I would like it to be, so I'm going to call it a wrap for now in terms of assembling our team. The last hire we do have to make is going to be the sales director. I'm going to push this off to another video because I want to cover that separately and still get into great detail. And then I also want to revisit the content director a little bit more to cover some of the other useful skills, like actually doing the weekly Reddit post to feature some of the events going around in the city, and then also how I extended my system to add another edition of the newsletter. So still a little bit more content to cover and go a little bit deeper on, but for now, I am going to still actually give away what I promised in the beginning, and that is going to be the organization export for my Spokane Pulse newsletter. So I'll export this here, upload this into my school community as a free download, and so make sure you join this for free. Find the post underneath YouTube resources, and if you pull it up, you're going to be able to download a JSON file that contains everything you need to pull this into your Paperclip instance and start tinkering with and adapting the skills for your newsletter. So you'll still be able to do that, but I will have to go more into detail on a follow-up. So here's everything you're going to see here underneath the Spokane Pulse company setup that you can pull in, apply, and tweak to your needs for your newsletter. Again, the other thing I do want to mention too is there's a lot more depth I have actually provided in the full course that I put together around using Paperclip to power a local newsletter business. Like I said before, it's about 10 hours of content I've gone through in really, really deep detail on how to set up every specific skill for all of these agents. And not only that, I get into the process of how to go forward with growing, marketing, actually implementing the sales process in the business and getting real revenue. So I've put a ton of work into this, would encourage you to check it out. It's here in the school community underneath the classroom tab. So get into school. It's going to be in the description of the YouTube video. Give me a like and subscribe. Share some comments on what else you want to see and what else isn't the most clear. And I'll keep putting out some more videos based around this because there's a lot to get into. I'll see you in the next one.